So if we had time in lecture today, I was thinking about what's one thing that I think students probably could use a short review of, and I was planning to do a short metabolism review. So I'm going to take a few minutes to do that here, to just kind of run through respiration and fermentation and the difference between those two things. And I also have a few practice questions that I was going to share in class today, and obviously we didn't have time to do that. So that's my plan, just with this short video. So a lot of confusion I see between the difference between fermentation and respiratory pathways. So both of them are going to start with glycolysis. So in glycolysis, you start with glucose and you end up with 2-pyruvate, right? And most of life does glycolysis. There are a few bacteria that will use the Entner-Doudoroff pathway instead. Remember, the pentose phosphate pathway is also an alternative to glycolysis when an organism's needs are more biosynthetic and not to get energy. All right, so we have to put in a little bit of ATP in order to get out some ATP in glycolysis. So organisms that have access to some kind of electron acceptor what are they going to do? They're going to run those pyruvates through the Krebs cycle. Okay, we had other names for that, TCA cycle or tricarboxylic acid cycle. In that Krebs cycle, you're only going to gain 2 ATP per glucose, but you're going to gain a ton of NADH. All right, so that's reducing power, right? You get a little bit of that in glycolysis as well, but a ton of it from the Krebs cycle. And remember, the NADH, that's carrying a hydride ion. That's carrying an electron and 2 electrons and a proton. Okay, so those electrons are going to go to the electron transport chain. It's a series of electron carriers located in the membrane, so that membrane has to be intact. And either oxygen's going to be the final electron acceptor if this is aerobic respiration, but in anaerobic respiration, you could have some kind of inorganic ion, so something like nitrate or sulfate or others. Okay, so again, that's anaerobic respiration. All right, so we can't do anaerobic respiration, but lots of bacteria can. It just takes certain enzymes like nitrate reductase, for example, and they are able to, again, accept those electrons. The protons get pumped outside of the cell and then come in at one point. Remember, that's at a particular enzyme, ATP synthase, and they diffuse in there, so that proton gradient powers the phosphorylation of ADP to ATP. Okay, so that's oxidative phosphorylation. When we're getting ATP up here in glycolysis, that's a substrate level phosphorylation. All right, so we can get lots of ATP potentially here, more when oxygen's the final electron acceptor, rather some other inorganic ion. Okay, so if an organism doesn't have potential electron acceptors or doesn't have the enzymes to do that, then it has no choice to go into some fermentation pathway. Okay, and so there's lots and lots of different pathways that organisms can use to do that. It depends on the organism. Sometimes it helps us identify them when we understand what kind of pathway they use. Either they're going to have some kind of, most bacteria are going to have an acidic end product. So that could be something like lactic acid. The streptococcus that we use in lab, all they do is a lactic acid fermentation. It doesn't matter whether there's oxygen there or not, but that's just all they do. So some organisms, it doesn't matter if they're in the presence of oxygen or not. For yeast, for example, they're going to usually end up with some kind of alcohol as an end product. Okay, oftentimes there might be a gas produced, not always, but a lot of times something like carbon dioxide, and sometimes a little bit of ATP, oftentimes not very much. So little to no ATP produced from, again, a fermentative pathway. But the important thing, these electrons are going to, usually something in the cell already, something organic, something that's there already, like pyruvate, will accept those electrons, and then the NAD carrier can cycle back and at least keep glycolysis going, and they are getting a little ATP from glycolysis. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's the difference between fermentation and anaerobic respiration. Okay, so that may help you going forward. I just wanted to, give you a few sample problems. I'm not really planning on posting a whole bunch of sample problems because I just don't have a whole bunch of them made up for the final. So use these. I would stop the video and just, take a stab at it and then check yourself and see if you got it right. Okay, so I'll give you the answers here, but again, just pause it for a minute. Which can be prevented by vaccination? Certainly not strep throat. We get that over and over again. We talked about how gonorrhea, due to that antigenic variation and phase variation, that it just changes too quickly. No, nothing. Remember, that's a strep pyogenes infection there. This, remember, is genital herpes. Working on it, don't have one yet. So the meningococcal meningitis and meningococcal quadrivalent, it's to those capsular antigens. So there's different subtypes of that capsule, A, B, C, Y, W135. So that's the vaccine to those capsule antigens. Okay, Bordetella Pertussis. Remember, that's the causative agent of whooping cough. Causes disease. It doesn't actually suppress the production of mucus. It actually makes more. So remember, we said in lecture, it has to be kind of the just right amount of mucus to cause any, to help us. Get too much, and it's too much work to cough it out. This is a nice idea, but somebody made that up. This actually wasn't my question. It's not really a pneumonia. It's something different. It interferes with the action of those ciliated epithelial cells of the trachea. So that's the hard coughs. And when you whoop, it's to try to get oxygen back in your lungs. Okay, which of these is false? So always pay attention to if it's asking for the true one or the false one. It causes disease in humans only. Yes, that's true. Infection in men, it's very painful. Yes, that's true. Secretes a protease that destroys secretory IgA. Remember, that's the most common antibody on the mucous membranes, not in the bloodstream. IgG is most common in the bloodstream. That's true. The gonococci induces lasting immunity. No, we just talked about that, how it changes so quickly, and this is true that infected women usually don't have symptoms, or at least half the time. All right, I think I've got one more for you here. This is just a little kind of terminology. Do you know your symptoms? So which of the following is a hallmark of meningococcal meningitis? Not a bubo, that's bubonic plague. We didn't talk about that. Endocarditis, no, that's inflammation of the heart valves. An eschar, remember that one is wound anthrax. Okay, so that's not it. Eye infections, that's common in babies that are infected with gonorrhea. The correct one here is petechiae. So that's that rash. It kind of starts out kind of purplish and turns black. due to the bursting of capillaries in the skin. Okay, so like I said, focus your attention on all these pathogens. I like to ask questions like, which of the following pathogens do this? Or which of the following infections has these symptoms? And it's easy after a while to kind of get them all mixed up. So just keep reviewing those. That's going to give you the most bang for your buck as you study for the final. And good luck. Be sure to email me if you have any questions, or come see me on Monday. I'll be around.